A lot of times when we think of ethics, we think about corruption. Now remember, this program and the study of ethics shouldn't be about all the evils and the bad things. It's about you creating the moral person that doesn't do the wrong things, that has the abilities and the tools and the education and the insight to evaluate stuff rather than acting proactive. But corruption does exist. And I want to talk about two parts of corruption: economic corruption and noble cause corruption. Noble cause corruption is probably one of the most difficult issues. Or we're going to talk about corruption of the noble cause. So let's look at economic corruption first. Now, when I use the word economic, I don't just mean money. I mean anytime you get something you have no right to get, anytime you take advantage because of your job and your power and you abuse it, that's what we're talking about with economic corruption. And it does exist. And we're going to talk, so more people are going to lose their job. And we're going to talk about some of the concepts under it. It's more tangible. If you steal, you're a thief. If you take advantage of somebody, you assault somebody, you assaulted somebody. This is really very tangible, very clear a lot of times, but it's not tangible how people get here and how easy it is to little by little, piece by piece, finding them. But this is really about an entitlement you have no right to, from the tiny cup of coffee that you demand to the drugs or the advantage you take over other people. It is the illegal use of police authority or power for economic gain. So it isn't just about tangible, I got my hand on it. It's using your job and the great power and that public trust given to you and abusing it. It is really explained in terms of the individual weakness of the rotten apple. And we're going to talk about, as we look at corruption and deviancy and some of the theories behind it. Corruption. We're going to look at, these are common phrases I just want to touch as we go through. Passive. This is the ones, I'll take it if you give it to me, but I don't solicit it. I kind of expect it, and I appreciate getting free tickets, free this, and different things, versus the active or the meat eater versus the grass eater. This is the person that's out shaking people down, that expect it, and there's a consequence. Even if something is small, as that cup of coffee I told you about in the story in Florida, that is actively, aggressively demanding something you have no right for. Graft, things I get, versus gratuities and gifts. Graft is more of the active, where I'm demanding or taking it, or maybe I'm getting money for protection. Where gratuities and gifts, for years people got gratuities and gifts. Nobody thought anything of it. As a young police officer in a small little department, when it come to Christmas, I always got gifts, and I thought nothing of it. But that's not today. And in fact, even then, was there an expectation? Sure there was, but we didn't talk about it now like we do today. The goal is, and it's a battle. Some people argue with community policing, we should be more active in building relationships. Well, that doesn't mean you're entitled to anything. And you don't need to get a gift. Now, one of the conflicts I remember as a deputy, I go in a restaurant and there's half-price meals for law enforcement in uniform. And everybody's there, and what do? Well, the sheriff, the old sheriff, great gentleman, Oscar would say, just pay the whole thing. Leave the biggest tip you can by paying the whole bill, and if they want to just take half it, okay, but never argue it. Because a lot of times it really is, more of a respect. But the point of it is, you don't want to take things. And it also looks bad. If cops walk into, for example, police officer walks into a SA station and grabs donuts and a cup of coffee and walks out. It looks wrong. And then we have two concepts I want to talk about that are key. Slippery slope. That's misused unbelievably. It doesn't. Now I have people say, get a free cup of coffee, next thing you know, you're selling drugs on the street. Slippery slope actually is going to be very common when we talk about noble cause corruption. This is where I do little bitty things and nobody holds me accountable, and they're not significant. We have a policy saying, for example, that I can't do something, but I violate it anyway. And so maybe it's a cup of coffee. I go in and I expect it, I take it, I walk out the door, I don't even try to pay for it. How easy it is. Or maybe I work in a task force and everybody's kind of cheating and doing some stuff and it's so easy to do. And then another thing's easier to do. And then another thing's even easier to do, which I wouldn't have done the third thing. I'd have never done it. But now it seems so insignificant. And then all of a sudden I do another thing that's worse. And again, it's so easy to do little by little and find yourself on this slippery slope. And now I am doing things that are significant, but I'm so now involved that I can't get out. That's a slippery slope. The abyss is different. You knew it was wrong in the first place, you did it, I don't care how bad it is. You know it's against policy, that's the issue. I don't care about the cup of coffee, it's against policy, that's the issue. You stepped off the abyss. So let's look at as we go through the different theories as we apply to corruption. Deviancy, think about explanations of deviancy or corruption. Where does corruption come from is what we're talking about. All right, the individual aspect. This is the rotten apple. Now for those of you, one rotten apple can affect an entire bushel. When you have somebody doing things and getting away with it and breaking the law and doing different things and nobody holds them accountable for. Now normally when you look at an incident, something happens and all of a sudden 4 or 5 people are caught. The issue is you'll hear on TV the chief or the commissioner saying, we had a couple bad apples, we got them, we weed them out, that's our job. I don't know how they got through the hiring process, we're okay now. A lot of times these problems aren't okay, they're systemic throughout the organization. It isn't 1 or 2 bad apples. And yeah, we should weed out bad apples. You know, in fact, that was part of my job for a period of time at BCA. A complaint against a police officer, and I don't mean minor ones, I mean crimes. I would be sent in, or whoever the agent, but that was where my duties was for a while, and I would do an investigation. 90% or better of those cases, we cleared the officer. They were wrongly accused. But you know something? In, I would say, maybe 2-3% they were guilty, probably closer to the truth. And we indicted them. And yet I had people criticizing that we went after officers. We need to police the organizations to be a profession. The next theory is organizational. This is where noble cause corruption falls in. This is saying the problem a lot of time isn't 2 or 3 bad apples. It's within an organization. It endorses behavior. And noble cause corruption is one of them, where officers are willing to do bad things to achieve what they believe is good ends. Again, I would say a good example, would be violating the rights of that individual. Or in noble cause corruption, it even gets bigger, as we talk about it. This is where the entire organization, the problem is not 1 or 2. It's systemic throughout. And then the last that we talk about is deviancy, is societal. Look at TV. What do people really want? Look at the TV shows. Look at the heroes. They violate people's rights. They do whatever they need to do to get the job done. They're just lucky enough they're doing it to the right people, correct? No, they can't do that. So we're telling one thing out of our mouth. We're saying, here's the standards, here's what you're supposed to be. It's a paradox. I want to protect society and all TV and everything's about whatever you have to do to protect society, and yet we argue on the other side, but I got to protect the rights even of those we don't like. It's a very big paradox for those in law enforcement. But we need to balance this, and we are the professionals within criminal justice, within law enforcement. All right, we're looking at culture and loyalty, and this is key, is going to talk about loyalty. So many times you're going to find in your career the issue is you're loyal or you're not loyal. I pull somebody over, he's a police officer, I need to be loyal to law enforcement, and he doesn't get a ticket. And again, I don't care about the ticket. It's not the issue. It's entitlement on the other side. So let's take a good look at loyalty. And remember, loyalty is a non-intrinsic value. Loyalty versus integrity is typically the conflict. Don't be wrong. Loyalty is a major, major value. But integrity is an intrinsic value, and how are you willing to give it up? Easy. So loyalty to who or why? Loyalty doesn't stand alone. Who am I loyal to and why? Is my loyalty to a partner I've worked for years and he's a godfather of my children versus somebody driving through the air that has a badge? Is loyalty to my family? And again, loyalty is not something you own, it's something I give you, I loan to you. And I can take it away if you violate it, like any relationships. So let's look at loyalty. Loyalty versus integrity. Loyalty to who and why. Can unwavering loyalty ever be a problem? Principles of loyalty. Now I want you to clearly look at the differences when we look at the value behind the loyalty. So let's look at the conflicts. I could have, in fact, when you're working on those scenarios, you could have 2 loyalties in conflict. Loyalty to that officer versus loyalty to your family. You're going to give everything away? I work with a partner sometimes we teach. And what he does is we look at people because of their unethical behavior end up in prison. And in fact, what we really do is look at the consequences to their family and their children for what happened in their lives now. And the number of suicides that are really, instead of because they're in these positions. So true loyalty to a partner would be not to lie for them once they do something, but peer intervention. Keep them from doing it. Set a contract and agreement. You start to use too much force, I'm going to pull you over. I am not lying for you, so don't lie. Set up these things. Loyalty is a balance. And especially as a leader, as a supervisor, your standards are critical to the people that work for you. All right, loyalty can be a conflict of values. Loyalty is one of the key things we talk about. Now I want to talk about noble cause. We just talked about economic corruption, which is a very vast area. Any entitlement, anything you get, one of the biggest crises considered facing especially law enforcement is that of noble cause corruption. When officers do bad things because they believe the outcome will be good. The other, economic corruption, you steal, you're a thief. Economic corruption is when officers are willing to cross the line because they believe what they're doing is right. And again, the story I told you about, and I'll use other stories. And the consequences. And a lot of times, noble cause corruption really falls within an organization because everybody knows you're doing it, but yet you seem to be getting the people off the street. We all went off the street, so we tolerate unethical behavior. Corruption of the noble cause. Doing bad things to accomplish perceived good or noble ends. Can you think of example? Changing my testimony so I make sure you're convicted. Lying on the stand even. Planning evidence because this person's a rapist or a criminal and they're getting away with it. Doing things, not that I gain anything, but things I believe they're going to accomplish the good ends. So why does ethics matter? If it's getting the ethical person or accomplishing your goals, getting the job, why does it matter? So we become the judge and the jury. It was a young man up by St. Cloud. I knew his dad well, actually, or his uncle. And he was a, excellent police officer with, and he changed the little facts. The search warrant, not a search warrant, he pulled a vehicle over and the evidence wasn't in plain view and the individual ended up going to prison. Well, it's quite a complicated story, but the guy ended up getting out of prison, suing the officer. The officer lost his job and will be paying that drug dealer for the rest of his life. Noble cause corruption. When you get caught, people aren't going to throw their arms around you and say, I know what you were doing was right and we support you. It is corruption. Corruption of a noble cause. Noble causes are what you want, to do the right thing. And it can become corrupted. And it's more difficult to identify. All right. Noble cause corruption. It is intangible. It's more, the explanation is really in why people go in. A lot of people go closely aligned to the morality of the police. Get the bad guy, protect society, do whatever we have to do. Again, back towards that societal and television. To be the hero, not to let him get away. Sometimes it's very frustrating in law enforcement. I've been there. Convicted, guy, he murdered this young lady and he was found not guilty. Not based on all the evidence, but based on the trial and based on all kinds of issues. You don't always win. It isn't about winning. You just do your best over the long term. Noble cause corruption. We have to look for the explanation in the nature of the police work and the kind of people that are drawn to it. Who noble cause is good, and that's typically why they're drawn to it. Consequences. It affects everybody. It's including, and we can be wrong. It's, we're there to protect the innocent. Individual officers can be, in other words, in so much trouble, sleepiness, supervisors, friction. The consequences, no longer are you just the person protecting society. This is a picture, actually, of Abu Ghraib. Let's take a look at this. Now, I want to explain. Could this be noble cause corruption? Now, here's what I'm getting at. If the officers there torture people because they're rotten apples, or were they actually told getting information from these people could help our troops in the field? then it becomes a greater good they're willing to do. And look at the consequence. Did this help the troops? No, it didn't. The same effect that happens to law enforcement when it's caught. They all look corrupt, and people quit trusting you. And and so it's like a building block, and so it ends up what you're trying to achieve ends up really negative in this example too. Consequence of noble cause corruption. Department may experience a loss of legitimacy in the eyes of the public, as in the example we just used, and even civil litigation and even prison. Now I want to talk about the last piece because a lot of times people confuse Dirty Harry syndrome or dirty hands with noble cause corruption. Dirty hands or Dirty Harry syndrome, and Dirty Harry was Clint Eastwood, and this guy has kidnapped a bunch of kids, and they're in a bus and they're all going to die. And he shoots the guy and gets the guy to tell him where he is, and the evidence thrown out. And a lot of times people say, I have no choice, and I want to explain the difference in this concept. Dirty hand syndrome. So this is basically, typically it's different than noble cause corruption. Noble cause corruption, you're willing to lie, you're willing to do whatever you have to do to get the job done. Under the Dirty Harry syndrome, you're willing to stand up and say, I did it, and take the consequences. The example I used of the kid and the individual where they're going to get him to confess, they videotaped the interview. They told the truth. They were willing to pay the consequences, right or wrong, for what they did. That was not noble cause corruption. The trouble is they were wrong and they had no right to do it. And the difference I'll explain. That you have a choice between two bad choices or alternatives only. And the one requiring dirty means is the only moral choice. This is such a grievous problem that there is no other alternatives other than the dirty means. And the dirty means and nothing other than the dirty means will result in the desired good ends. In the story of the person I told you about earlier, it wasn't, I ran a cold case homicide unit. It wasn't 5 years old. We wouldn't even have taken it. How do you know somebody wouldn't have found the body? Now, if you believe she was alive, like Harry in Dirty Harry, that would be different. But there was no indication, nobody believed almost 5 years that she was alive. There was other alternatives, and so it doesn't fit. This would be a scenario, anybody ever watched the show 24? I don't, I want to say that. And where all of a sudden the bomb's there, and it's going to go off, and a lot of people are going to die. And you have this person, what are you going to do? Will you torture him to save all those people? There's no other choice, and the clock's ticking. Very, very, if any situations fall within this parameter, within law enforcement. Dirty means. The dirty means are the only possible means to achieve the goal. Willing to take the consequences. So I do what I believe right, and I'm willing, it's so right that I'm willing to pay the consequences even if I end up going to prison, because it's the right thing. Most situations don't fall in this category at all. The bottom line is, to summarize where we've gone, a lot of these tools are the tools you'll use in your program. The key is we are our values. And when you talk about character, what we stand for, what we do is key. We are our values. But the concept of broken window, for most of you follow, is about little things mean a lot, and it does, and ethics means a lot. So using this stuff, the concepts and the theories we talked about, you're going to end up applying them in the next part. So that's all, folks.